David Corenswet stars as Jack Costello, an aspiring actor in Ryan Murphy's new Netflix series, Hollywood. I'm Tony Ruiz of Gold Derby. And David, the first thing that I was thinking of when I watched this show is you have to start off playing a aspiring actor who's not necessarily a good actor at the beginning. And then by the end of the series, you're more established, you're Oscar nominated. So which is more, is it harder to play a bad actor?
No. This is the $1 million question. It is 100% harder to play a good actor. I mean, to be in a show where the actor that you're pretending to be is supposed to end up nominated for an Oscar, and you have to see the performance or some part of it that is allegedly responsible for getting him nominated. Definitely harder. Bad acting, easy. Good acting, hard.
It's so interesting, too, that you say that, because one of the things that this character has to do has to obviously be an Oscar-nominated actor, but clearly acting styles have changed, between 1946 and now. So what kind of research did you do were there performances that you looked at from the 40s?
Yeah, for sure. I went back and watched a lot of movies that I had watched growing up, because those were most of the films that we watched growing up were from the first half of the century. The Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies, the Gene Kelly movies. Singing in the Rain was a family favorite growing up, dozens and dozens of times. I'm just going to warn you, at some point in the next couple of sentences, my cat is going to start yelling. I promise it's my cat and not a baby. And I promise she's in no distress. She's very happy. I'm just warning you. Here it comes. But so Singing in the Rain is a favorite. Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor, definitely models for the sort of the young, earnest, wide-eyed, good-natured guys who don't cause too much trouble. I just because I was sort of secretly hoping, yeah, buddy, it's okay. You're going to be okay. Just because I was hoping that my guy Jack was going to turn out to be, a real broody, one of those cool guys. I watched a lot of Marlon Brando and James Dean and Montgomery Clift as well. I didn't get to go so much in that direction. He definitely stayed in the soft-hearted, good-natured direction. But it did mean that I got to rewatch On the Waterfront and East of Eden and Rebel Without a Cause and A Place in the Sun. Those were some that I had seen before and some that I watched for the first time. And it's fun because in those movies, even in On the Waterfront, which I think is an incredible film and an incredible performance by Marlon Brando, there are some moments where when I watch it, I go like, that wasn't a great scene there, or that wasn't the way he delivered that line, I didn't really believe, or whatever. It just goes to show, it really is, good acting is harder than bad acting. Even the greatest actors in their greatest performances can turn in, awkward moments or just miss the mark. It's really hard to have a really flawless thing. So it meant that in the same film, I could draw an inspiration for, what really terrific acting and performance looked like in that era. And also what moments that at least I thought, sort of missed the mark looked like. For the really bad acting, I went to for the screen test where I'm supposed to really, screw myself over. I went and looked at the actual film that scene is from, Taproots, which I had never seen before, I'd never heard of before, and just watched that scene with the gentleman who's very good in it. But it was fun to watch that and just be like, oh yeah, there are a lot of movies from that era that there's a reason that they're not all classics.
Yeah, but at the same time, this film, even though it is, Ryan has used the term faction with this, and you talk about like Jack's kind of arc to where he ends up. Do you have a sense of the types of movies that Jack would be making, going forward? Because there was certainly a transition between the 40s and the 50s and the 60s of the film period. Did that enter into your brain at all?
Well, we did talk about it a little bit. It's so funny, Ryan sort of coined this faction, fact plus fiction. It's historical fiction. There's a word for it. It's historical fiction. You take a historical period and you make stuff up about it. Ryan loves the quippy, faction's easier to say and sounds a little like edgier and sexier than historical fiction, which sounds sort of like you're in a history class or something. But we talked about it a lot because the whole the whole sort of conceit of the turn of the show is that history changes. It doesn't take the route that it was supposed to take, and this new kind of film that is this total risk, full sail to the wind. We're just going to go for it. We're going to cast a young black actress as the lead. It's going to be a black writer. This sort of monumental risk that they take that ends up paying off in Ryan's timeline is supposed to sort of pave the way to an earlier adoption of the movement in film and television that has happened more recently, which is the highlighting of marginalized voices. We in our business, we tell stories, and some stories get told and some stories don't, and sometimes that's because of racial bias or racial barriers or barriers to sex or just the idea that, well, nobody wants to hear that person's story. We want to hear the stories we've always heard, and inevitably that turns out to not be the case. Everybody wants to hear new stories and interesting stories and stories about struggle. So the idea that the industry would have changed after Meg, this fictional movie that we're making in the television show, and then you do get to see at the very end, spoilers for people who haven't finished it yet, but you do get to see at the end the next movie that we're going to go on and make, a year after the success of Meg, which is supposed to be the first, sort of blockbuster, wide release film about two gay men, and their relationship, their romantic relationship. And so I think that's when Ryan talked to me about where he saw things going, and there's been the beginnings of we're lucky the show has been, affecting enough people, reaching enough people, and people have liked it enough that there are the beginnings of talks of the possibilities of potential maybe season 2s. Nothing's for certain yet, but storytellers love to imagine. And so what Ryan's told me is that he would love to get to see a little more of how the industry would have changed and what kind of movies would have gotten made. I think for Jack, he ends up in the end taking this next step risk. In Meg, he's just playing the love interest. It's not a particularly risky part to play. He's more supporting, his castmates who are taking the real risks. But in the subsequent film about the two gay men, he agrees to play one of the gay men, which even in the alternate timeline that we're in 1948, would have been a real big risk to his career, and who knows how it would have turned out. I think in Ryan's mind, that last film that we're making, Dreamland, turns out to be a hit, and that too changes, the direction of the industry.
And isn't it interesting? And I was gonna go there too, because even as early as recent as maybe 15, 20 years ago, there was still kind of this attachment that a straight actor playing gay was somehow seen as brave, or a big deal was made out of it. I mean,
sure.
So it when you look at the concept of this fictional piece that Ryan has put together, what do you think? Because it does seem to have touched a chord with audiences. What do you think it is about the show that makes that has drawn people in?
I think, I leave the actual science behind that to much smarter people like Ryan. I think the biggest, the clearest upside to the show is just that it's a ton of fun and it's very optimistic. It doesn't feel like a trudge through, we're not digging up old history and just reliving the difficult things about it. It's, on the one hand, it addresses all these important issues that are on people's minds, and it touches them, although I think it touches them with sort of a lighthearted, more kind of playful touch, where it's not digging into the depths of all of these really deep and complicated issues, but it's bringing them up, and then it's just putting a playful spin on them and an optimistic spin on them, and it's taking these young people who have had their struggles, but for the most part are looking forward to the future and imagining how they might take these really serious issues of the time and spin them into a fantasy, a positive version of what happened that can really feel energizing and make people feel hopeful for the future. So that's what I watched. That's what I experienced watching it myself as an audience member, was just that it's very easy to watch, and it really makes people feel energized and hopeful. And because it takes place in the 40s, with a bunch of fictional characters as well as real characters, but everything sort of gets turned on its head, and it takes this alternate reality path. It's just fun and easy. You don't have to examine anything too deeply. You just get to feel like there's hope for the future. There's a lot of people who care and are willing to work hard, and you end up caring about the characters and their relationships. And in the end, again, spoilers, although this is kind of the point, you get to cheer them on to their happy endings. You don't have to suffer through too many big defeats at the end. It's definitely an uplifting, hopeful for the future ending.
It's interesting that you say that about these young people that are kind of bonded together, because the show is as much about them, but it's also about these group of executives played by these really legendary actors that you got to work with, and so I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. And obviously at the center of that is Patti LuPone, who you have so many great scenes with, and sometimes some very intimate scenes. So what was it like? I know she was so excited to have love scenes. So what was it like working with her?
I mean, an absolute dream. She's a legend for a reason, and but she's also, I mean, having come from the theater, and also she went to Juilliard. She was in the first group at Juilliard, and I graduated from Juilliard, so I sort of had we had a specific connection there. But she's just a real professional. I mean, it's very clear why she's had the success that she's had, and why she is revered in the way she's revered. She shows up, warm, welcoming, knowing, what she's doing and ready to go. But at the same time, sort of this, I think a great quality in veteran actors is that feeling of you're always doing it for the first time, every time. And who knows what's going to come up or how it's going to work out or whether it's going to work out. You never know whether the thing that has worked for you before is going to work for you again. So to have somebody like her show up and kind of say to me, like, I don't know what we're doing. Like, well, let's figure it out along the way. That's really energizing, and feels exciting. Feels like you as a young actor, feels like maybe you have something to contribute, which is really great. We had an absolute ball together.
Well, and that actually kind of reminded me, there's a moment where you're getting these acting notes, where Jack is getting these acting notes from Holland Taylor, of all people. Was there ever a weird kind of moment where you're thinking, am I acting, or is this like, I mean, did you find yourself stealing ideas from and getting, lessons from these actors?
I mean, you can't help but learn when you're watching them work, just because their process, all of them, Joe Mantello, Jim Parsons, Holland Taylor, Patti LuPone, Dylan McDermott I had a lot of stuff with Dylan, and watching them work, all actors who have very evident processes, like you can see them going through, doing their work, coming up with their ideas, feeling out the room, but because they've been doing it for a while and have a certain level of comfort, with their processes, it's just, I mean, it's like watching a musician, a brilliant musician warm up. It's a warm up like anybody else. You sort of, you're like seeing behind the scenes. It feels a little dirty to watch them, figure out the scene. But at the same time, you then get to see how it plays into the performances that they give, and the eye contact that they make, and the way they deliver their lines, the way they talk to the director. Can't help but learn when you're watching actors like that work, and especially on material like this, which is often very kind of out there. It's fun, especially Dylan and Jim, get to do some really wacky, crazy stuff. To watch them work up to that is really amazing. And then as far as like getting acting notes from Holland Taylor in this scene, there's a trope, a tradition among actors that you're never supposed to give another actor a note. That's the job of the director, and actors don't give other actors notes. I'm generally one, at least on the receiving end, where I am very happy to get notes from other actors. I kind of feel like anybody might have figured the scene out better than me. there's no reason why I have a monopoly on what's useful or what's right. But great actors like Holland, they're very respectful and they're not going to step on anybody's toes. But once, especially in that scene where we were talking about acting and Holland studied with Stella Adler and the description she gives in that scene of the new wave of acting, the naturalism that's coming down the pike, that's just around the corner. She sort of recounted to me when Stella Adler was teaching, how that theme came across and how arresting it was for the students to have this new way of thinking described to them. And so it was sort of layers of meta theatricality, where there I am, an actor, listening to Holland Taylor describe her as an acting student, learning from Stella Adler in order to illuminate the scene where the character that I'm playing, who's an actor, learning from this great acting teacher, is having the new movement of naturalism explained to him. So basically what happens, the whole scene, I'm just sitting there in awe, listening to her talk. And then I'm pretty sure we filmed some version of that, and that's what ended up in the show.
Well, and you talk about that, and there has been, and you alluded to it earlier, there's been allusions to rumors of a second season, and it could be a continuation or it could be like an anthology. And whether those rumors are true or not is inconsequential to me. What I want to know is there if this was an anthology, this is a very specific time in Hollywood, is there a time that you think would be ripe for this type of historical fiction that you would really love to tackle?
I think anthology would be great, because just like Ryan's American Crime Story, there are all of these sort of noteworthy and historic true crime events that sort of captured the public attention and are ripe for storytelling. And the only thing they have in common really is that they're these crimes that took place and were scrutinized by the public. And so with Hollywood, it's a great title for the show, I think, because movies can change the world. You put a different kind of movie up on the big screen, and you convince enough people to come and see it, and you can change the culture. You can change what people expect and what people are hoping for. And the great thing about the history of Hollywood in the United States and also around the world is that there are these movements, just like there are, in addition to there being film movements, in the way that there are art movements or music, historical music movements. Just the industry of Hollywood had so many great movements. The studio system, the independent film movement, the sort of the action movies of the 80s, the sort of cynical things like The Matrix in the 90s, where movies reflected the economic boom and the sort of the relative security that everybody felt. And then you have, the Marvel movement, the big tentpole movement. There are all these epochs in the history of Hollywood, which isn't that long, 150 years maybe. So many territories that are ripe for exploration. My favorites would definitely be, I love the independent film movement of the 60s and 70s, John Cassavetes movies, and that where the golden age of Hollywood was so much about the glamour and the pristine depiction of these larger than life characters. The independent film movement captured a lot of daily life and sort of the grunge of real people and real messy relationships, and that was mirrored in the filmmaking. The filmmaking was the great thing about the Cassavetes movies and other movies of that era are they sort of stopped caring about continuity and sharp focus. It was really about capturing real moments. And you didn't care whether the shot was perfectly in focus or not. You cared whether you were capturing a real thing happening on an actor's face. So that would be super fun to explore, especially, I don't know whether it would be, one never knows with Ryan, whether it would follow this alternate timeline or whether it would start again in the actual 60s or the actual 90s or whenever it might happen, and then take a different alternate timeline if things had happened differently at that time. So it's just like the possibilities are endless. But the thing that's always fun is, as an actor, being a part of a television show or a film that's about making movies. It's just you can't help it but have a good time doing that. It's one of the reasons I love Singing in the Rain. It's a movie about people making movies.
A film that we all love equally. And if you don't, I can't help you. Everybody, go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the Emmys, and stay tuned for more interviews throughout the season. David Corenswet, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, sir. Great to talk to you. Take care.